We are joined today by Fadi and Ahmed from SAE Institute, Robert from Kids Clever, and Arif from MBC Group. Education and games, I mean, that's such a wide subject, but in the same time, lacking so much in our region, really. It's maybe the most important element of growing our industry and growing our talents to be part of this industry. And but still, we're still not finding enough talents, even for the demands that we have in the job market. So I'll start with you, Fadi and Ahmed, about first of all, what's the status of this education for the gaming industry?
Yeah, well, thanks, Habib. I think just to build on what you just said, I think there are two aspects that we're probably going to be talking about in this panel that I've got in touch with the other panelists ahead of this session. Well, the first aspect is actually about talent. So how we all realize that talent is an important pillar of the gaming industry as a whole. So this is going to be one aspect that we're going to shed some light on, and the other one is going to be about the actual gamification and what we call serious gaming, which is the application of game design and development within the education. So in order to reform education through game. So these are the two different aspects. They're completely different angles of the same subject, but they fall under the umbrella of education and gaming, as I believe. And I think also, judging from the logistics, we're going to have in two stages this session. One is with our panelists right now. Ahmed is from SAE, and as you introduced the other two gentlemen
Robert and
joining
Arif,
us online.
yes.
Robert
Arif from Kids Clever and Arif from MBC.
And I think stage two, we will be having another dialogue with another panelist.
Of course,
that will be joining us.
We are going to have more sessions on education and games. So for today,
so for me for today, my first I think area that and obviously most of our panelists have very good experience in starting up education games in the region. So I wanted to get a feel of what do they consider what is intriguing about the regional market for the gaming industry, what makes them get into it, invest in it, and at the same time what they consider to be the biggest barriers to entry. So if you can maybe touch some light upon this, and maybe Robert, you can kick us off with this discussion, and then everybody will have a say on that point, and then that will lead us to maybe hopefully what the other points we'll be discussing. Robert, you want to shed some light on the biggest barriers to entry, or what got you into it in the first place?
Okay, thanks Fadi, thanks Habib, thanks everybody. I'd like to talk, well, first of all, in the Arab market for digital learning content, the market is still the virgin, so to speak. There's not enough content around today across across all ages. Also, we feel that interactive learning, or how do you say, achievement-based learning, it's the future of learning. We see today that there's a lot of, in learning you have a lot of, how do you say, emphasis on memorizing content, learning to remember history, books, etc. We see the world today turning towards goal-based learning and achievement-based learning. So, and of course, in the digital, and that moves. That a lot of that is happening in the digital realm. So, so there are 2 points mainly for the Arab market: is that there's not enough learning content, modern, contemporary digital learning content, and also with an emphasis towards achievement-based learning or goal-based, task-based learning. This is the future of learning, we believe. So that's why we've moved into this space.
So that's the opportunity. In terms of the barriers that you've seen so far.
Excuse me?
The biggest barriers to entry.
The barriers, okay. So the barriers, so you have to, if you're a startup, you need to be quite resourceful in terms of talent. You mentioned that at the beginning. So you need coders and artists and voiceovers and singers and or maybe animators and so on. So it's, you know, you've got the multimedia. You need a multimedia, I say, team who's able to come together to produce all of that. And then once you have all of that ready, then you've got to discover your right channels, because the channels for edutainment or educational type content are many. And to monetize straight away, finding those channels aren't easy. It takes you a lot of time. That's you know, there's two steps. So you need the right team, and of course you need to find out which of the monetization channels you will be focusing on. You can't focus on them all as a startup. You need a lot of money and resources to do that. So you've got to pick yours. Will you be working for government, producing classroom content? Will you be, let's say, providing the content yourself directly to consumers? Will you go for edutainment, i.e. apps and so on in the market? Those three different channels are entirely different. For you to have the resources as a developer to enter these markets, you need a lot of money, basically. So you need to pick wisely, get as much information you can as from your channels as possible, and arrive at a monetization as quickly as possible, so that you can prosper and grow your company.
That's good. And Arif, I know we've been chatting around this topic earlier, and while Robert covered very well the opportunity and barriers specifically within the education-related gaming part of the industry, I know you have some views about opportunities as well as barriers when it comes to the overall gaming industry as a whole, education gaming being part of it. So you want to shed some light on that as well?
Sure. I think Robert covered it very nicely. The two major points that he made was the rush to monetize. And I think this is, I'll only add one point to this particular point, which is the culture that we live in. You know, the parents always want you to go to work quickly, start making money quickly, start growing up the ladder in corporate very quickly, which is also not helping, in the sense that you need to be making very good money from the beginning to make a successful game. But you come and see that there are a lot of independent publishers of games, and there are a lot of Arab publishers of games that are independent. The reason they're not developing AAA games is, one, the need to monetize, as Robert was mentioning. Two, because there's not enough collaboration, and this takes a lot of investment. This takes about 2 or 3 years before you can launch that game, of being offline, before you can actually launch a AAA game. Which is why we still import our games from China, from the US, and we Arabize them. And when we Arabize them, they do super well. So there is still this gap that exists between not necessarily stopping the import, but stopping this practice of Arabizing international games, and realizing that you can actually do it ourselves in this region and publish it under our banner.
Yeah, and I think this applies. Actually, it has a much wider scope related to the culture that prevails in most of the, so to speak, third world countries, and the Arab world is one of them. Is we tend to grow to become more consumers. So we're a consumer society rather than creators of knowledge. And this is what I think where you're driving at, is that transition from consuming to creating knowledge does take time. Right. So that means every game you want to create, you have to take an entrepreneurial approach to every single game creation. And I think both of you touched upon an important aspect of it, which is talent and the availability of that talent from both aspects. One is from that talent skills readiness, so readiness of the talent from the skill sets, and I think this is a good segue to get to Ahmed's view on this, as well as the availability of talent taking on this challenge due to the cultural taboos or barriers of entry or making money fast. So study business, work in a bank, get employed quickly. That's your route when you want to choose your career, versus no, suffer for a few years, put that. So that's again part of the cultural resistance we get. So maybe it's a good segue with Ahmed to shed some light on the overall, how do we educate talent, how do we groom talent, how do we make sure talent is ready from a skill set perspective, as well as how do we overcome cultural barriers. So I know at SAE, where you lead the games development division, you come across a lot of these challenges. So maybe we can shed some light on that.
Yes, I mean, as a head of the games development department, I actually see a lot of talents in the region. I even see a lot of people who are multi-talented. So people who can do 3D modeling and do programming at the same time. People who are interested in music and can do programming. And this kind of people are quite rare, and they are a great material for game development. The only main issues that I find is kind of the experience, because all of them, when they graduate, they are quite young, and they have good knowledge, a good amount of knowledge, they have good amount of skills, but then they don't have the years-long experience that you usually would get or you would find somewhere else in the region. So this is actually something that we, as a community or as people who are interested in the industry and growing the industry in this region, we should try to focus on. And I can see that there are multiple sources of information. So if there is someone who has talent, who's interested in game development, he can have a lot of ways where he can make himself prepared and ready for this industry. One of them, of course, is just learning online, self-taught, but that doesn't guarantee to have a whole flow of sequence or cover all the topics that you need. So there is another option, which is university, like ourselves. There is other fields as well that you can start from. And the one thing about the game development is that it can incorporate a lot of fields. So a lot of people who start with graphic design, and we try always to improve, to connect with industry stakeholders in the region, starting from UAE, and maybe we can try to reach the GCC countries, all the GCC countries, all the Middle East countries, to basically grow a community, and then focus on connecting the people with experience to the fresh skills, fresh talented people who exist but don't find a lot of people who can guide them. So this is I believe an opportunity, because as you said, Fadi, there is a lot of consumers here, a lot of consumers in the region. We consume a lot of games. We play a lot of games. We all love them, and we all are ready to pay to get a game or to pay more inside the game. That's great, but then we don't really produce anything out of this love and out of this passion that we have.
It's good. I think on this point, so if I were to summarize what probably Ahmed, what you're saying in one sentence, is one of the biggest obstacles you see as you groom talent and upskill them, is to accompany that grooming and upskilling with practical application of the knowledge that they are learning. And maybe it's a good again segue here with Robert. You can tell us, because I think this is one of the elements you picked on to launch GlobalShare, where it actually creates a platform to connecting talent with projects or where there's talents are needed, if I understand it correctly. So maybe tell us a little bit more about this challenge and how we think we are addressing it in the region.
Okay. Yeah. So helping students get from the classroom into jobs in the gaming industry, there is a bridge gap missing, definitely. In fact, I'm aware there's a number of companies emerging which are helping students make that transition from university to jobs, especially in the IT industry, but not such for the gaming industry. It would be worth looking at, I think. So yeah, I think DGC, thanks to DGC, there is now a game community in the Middle East. And I think community is really everything when it comes to working with one another. So knowing and contacting and networking is vital. So I think internships would help students get from the classroom into the correct jobs. So if DGC could help us link up with students or SEAs, to help companies like us link up with students for internships, that way we can help grow both the companies and help the students transition from the classroom to commercial experiences. On another note, we have a platform as well called GlobalShare. It's one of our companies. We're a marketplace for selling work skills and knowledge and IP, and your students on ACA are welcome to join our platform to offer their knowledge, skills, and personal IP for sale. And we also find buyers for them. So we're playing a part in that bridge as well.
That's great.
You
you
know,
want to say something?
actually, we've been hearing the same thing over the past 3 days, which is how to shed more light on what's happening in the gaming industry in our region. Of course, DGC is such a platform, but then again, the frequency of the show and how it cannot happen every day. But we don't know what's happening all the time in our region in the gaming industry. We don't know the needs of this company in this country, this institution here, or this organization there, or this new studio coming in maybe to establish here. So what Robbie just said, and I think what we've been hearing a lot during these 3 days, is that putting more light, communicating more, and understanding more who is who in the industry and what are the needs here and there is very important. Now, for example, one solution would be GlobalShare. Another solution would be to keep on networking on the DGC platform, having more DGCs, having more media, having more communication, having more communication between the people that meet each other and sharing more knowledge. And we have seen that model succeed in other parts of the world. We have seen it succeed in many parts of the world because of the in the end, the community is the base of an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And
so we need a tightly knit community.
A community that needs to communicate more. Yes. You know, that's the whole point. And then we know more, and then there is more news. There is more. Even at DGC, sometimes I learn after a few months that this deal was signed during DGC. You know, and I don't know. I know about it after. You know, which if we know it at the same time, we have all the setup to blow it up and just make it news, you know. Definitely. So yeah, I believe what Robert is saying is this also, and I think what you guys are saying as well. Arif, maybe Fadi, you had one more question because
yes, because I think we need to wrap up.
We're wrapping up part one.
Part one,
and then we have a part two. Yeah,
part two. So I just wanted one area that I think we haven't touched upon that does, I think, directly linked to growing the gaming market in our region is related to IP and copyrights. And I think, you know, one of the biggest barriers across any content published, whether it is software industry in the past, you know, in general, the software development, in terms of even content publishing as a whole, books, what have you, is in most of the countries in the Arab world or in the MENA region, is the disregard to IP and copyright, and that always creates a barrier to growing the market. Any last thoughts on this very quickly before we wrap up, and I can summarize what we've talked about today?
Yeah, I can pop in on that if you like.
Yeah, please go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, following what Arif said and what you said now about importing content, in the Arab market, it seems to be a lack of confidence in producing local IP. I think the teachers of students have to put more emphasis on critical thought or on, how do you say, learning about, other IP throughout the world in the history of art and the history of communication. If we share and impart this knowledge more, we in the Arab market will become more critical of ourselves and be able to produce more original content. We lack confidence in this market. Maybe it's because we haven't been doing it for too long, but with emphasis on critical, on critical thought, we will have the confidence to achieve and create our own IP. This is very important. IP is the basis of wealth in the world at the moment. If you talk to Netflix, they produce their own content now. They see that because of the many other companies that are emerging offering video, that they have to produce their own IP to stay in business. If you talk to games, traditional toy companies, their emphasis is on owning the characters and their brands, and outsourcing manufacturing and merchandising to other companies. So the value of the future of work is in the creation of IP, and the local region must look very seriously at this if it is to compete or stand a chance of competing at all in the future of work.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I mean, I probably what I was referring to more about not the motivation to understand the value of IP and creating content, but how to protect it. And I think the lack of confidence in their ability to protect their IP in a lot of the countries. I mean, we've gone a long way. If I look at the last 15 years of how countries around the region have dealt with IP protection and the seriousness of it, I think we've gone far, miles from where we were 10 or 15 years ago. But I think, you know, copyright laws have been in place for a long time in many of the countries, but have now been enforced in most of the countries. So that, I think, as this goes in parallel, it will create more confidence in investment also, because I think one of the areas you've mentioned is lack of good investment in creating content, because that requires, I think, Arif, you touched upon this subject specifically, is to create these AAA games, there needs to be backing behind it, investment, and investment is usually very cautious about.
I'd like to add one point.
Yeah, go ahead, Arif.
When it comes to IP, especially in this region that generally lags a little behind the rest of the world, you can't find broadcasting stations like ourselves, like NBC, for example. And I'm not speaking on behalf of NBC, I'm just giving it as an example. But you will find that as the audience or the mass tends towards the apps and the games and all of that, there will be a higher appetite for companies like NBC to license out that IP, to create that protective bubble, if you want, to the developer, to come and develop these games for the audience that exists here. It could be, I'm not saying it would, it could be a revenue share model, or it could be something where we license out elements of a particular game show for the audience to play offline when it's not on TV. So that goes both ways. There is a lack of protection in general when it comes to IP, not just in this region, but in the entire world. But it also works both ways if the ecosystem finds a way of collaborating with each other. Yeah. Because again, it is an ecosystem and each one has to do their part. So there is, within this huge ecosystem, as it continues to grow, you will find all the elements that you need to succeed.
Yes, and there are proven workarounds as well for protecting IPs in different other industries other than gaming. Good. I think we've reached the time. We need to wrap it up. So
for part one.
Yes, and I want to thank Robert, Arif, and Ahmed for their contribution. Very valuable. And I think part two will
focus more on esports academies, and education in esports, which is.
Yes, and then at the end of part two, we can wrap everything up and create a summary. Great, thank you everyone for your participation.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Habib, for the opportunity.
Thank you, DGC.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.